welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV, and also a big welcome to our studio audience who are joining us here today. I'm delighted to be joined by Rabbi Shlomo Farhi, who's going to be speaking to us about the topic of leadership. Rabbi, how are you doing?
Really well. Thank you for having me here today.
Take it away.
One of the things I'm most passionate about, because I work a lot with students and young people, is that there seems to be a tremendous lack of leadership across the Jewish community. I hear it on all stages, whether it's with regards to students on campus, where on campus after campus, they're not finding as many people running for leadership positions. It's also true on the higher level, where people are telling me that there are not enough, or at least different types of rabbis that they can connect with. And this has to be coming from somewhere. One of the beautiful things about Jewish wisdom is that it's meant to be timeless. It's not something which was pitched at any specific century or generation. It's supposed to be something that rolls over from generation to generation, kind of like a good mobile minutes plan. And what I found after studying a little bit about the concepts of leadership in Judaism was that there was one deciding factor that seemed to be the cause, or at least the root cause, for much of this problem. And I thought maybe today we would use this opportunity to speak about it, and hopefully those of our listeners out there that are hearing this perhaps will find some inspiration to be able to take on that mantle of leadership, which so few seem to be doing. There's an amazing idea that gets taught in psychology, which is the fact that every single human action and interaction flows from the definitions that we have. So as an example, if someone comes from a abusive background, their parents were unfortunately abusive parents, then in their future they might either become people who are abusive parents themselves, because that's the definition for parenthood that they've learned as a young child, and vice versa. Sometimes they react in exactly the opposite way, where they become incredibly caring, almost to a fault, in order to kind of countermand that definition which has been implanted in their minds as youngsters. But either way, they seem to be influenced by that definition. The same thing is true for marriages. The same thing is true for versions of success. And we're finding it today in more and more cases where people are finding body image issues because the definition of a good or perfect body image is sold from such a young age in such a clear way that if I can't figure out a way to satisfy that definition, I don't have it. Leadership is no different. And our version of heroes or leaders, whether you look to the movies today, which culture plays such an important part in the way we almost gain these values almost by osmosis, is that when you look at the heroes of the world of media, of Hollywood, they seem to always invariably be heroes or leaders that are endowed with some sort of extraordinary character trait. They can fly, they're incredibly wealthy, so they can buy all the gizmos and gadgets they need to save Gotham or whatever it might be. But for your average everyday man, there isn't really a hope or a possibility of them taking that up, because that's clearly defined or designed to be something that applies only to the limited few, to the extraordinarily gifted among us, to the ones that are blessed with the ability to be great orators, or, credible erudite thinkers, or massive personalities, or, stars of film or music. But little old me, what can I be? Torah wisdom teaches us exactly the opposite. And I think perhaps this definition that's been handed to us, that we've been raised on, has been so catastrophic that it's stolen from us this incredible opportunity that every single person, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, they forget that they are leading somebody. They might be leading their child, they might be leading the people that they come into contact with. In every single way, and on every single day, we have opportunities to lead, to inspire, to educate, not perhaps by textbook or in speeches, like someone who gives speeches like myself, or perhaps others do, but by the simplicity of their actions. So I wanted to perhaps share this wisdom where it came from. I'm passionate that Jewish wisdom should be sourced in Jewish sources. Otherwise, it's a rabbi opining in his own definition and calling it Jewish wisdom. Right. So perhaps I wanted to kind of come at you from where I saw it from. It's really one sentence, and in a way it shaped the way I saw leadership, and hopefully the way others will see leadership in their lives as well. It's a verse about the absolute go-to man when you're thinking about Jewish leadership. And just to ask the audience as an example, if I had to ask you who was the archetype of Jewish leader, who would that be? Moses, right? Abraham is perhaps the founder of the religion of Judaism, but his nation is born to him. He is the father, perhaps, of Judaism, and Moshe is the consummate leader. But there's something we learn about Moshe, which is, it's so engaging, and to my mind, once you kind of focus on it, and you try and apply that to real life, which is what Jewish wisdom is supposed to be, the application of ancient divine wisdom to modern settings and times, it almost explodes in front of you and just like, wow. We read about Moshe how as a child he's floated down the river, he gets taken to the house of Pharaoh, becomes the prince of Egypt. We read about in one of the verses, and the child grows up. And in the very next verse, so one sentence after we read about the growing up of this child, we read, Vayehi bayamim hahem, and it was in those days, Vayigdal Moshe, and Moshe grows up. Vayetze el echav, and he goes out to his brothers, Vayar besivlotam, and he sees in their suffering. Now, I always tell people who are studying Jewish wisdom that the best way of studying it, even though there's been an incredible proliferation of Jewish wisdom and Jewish knowledge that's out there in English, but to go to the source in its original Hebrew is sometimes so much more illuminating, because the word itself teaches us an unbelievable lesson here. We read about Moshe growing up one sentence ago, and then we read about him growing up again, and the difference in the syntax is illuminating. First you read about a child growing up, but that happens to everybody. What makes Moshe's story unique? Vayigdal Moshe. What makes Moshe Moshe? Vayetze el echav. He goes out to his brothers. Vayar besivlotam, and he sees in their suffering. To see someone suffering, you can't just sit where you are and see it. We are consumers today of media. We watch almost sometimes in an inappropriate way, the lurid images, if you will, of suffering that go on all around the world. We think when we see the pictures of refugees coming out of Syria, we understand it because we've seen the images. We understand suffering or hunger in Africa because we've gone for a day or two, and or we've seen the pictures of the campaigns that they're running on TV. But the truth is, you can never know someone else's suffering. Never. Because you're not in their space. But at the very least, Moshe endeavors to do so. He lives a privileged lifestyle like so many of us do. Vayetze el echav, he goes out to them, leaves his castle, leaves his carriage, and he notices Vayar besivlotam. He sees in their suffering. Now, that language doesn't really make sense. It should say he saw their suffering, but it says he saw in their suffering. The commentators explain that he noticed the scene that was chaotic. People are screaming, people are being beaten, children are being drowned. But he doesn't just notice the injustice of it all. He notices that old men are being given jobs that would be more comfortable for the young are given the jobs that should have been given to the old. So perhaps they're not feeling a physical pain, but an emotional one. They're watching their grandfather struggle with a job that they could do easily, and they're begging, if you could imagine, the taskmaster, let me take his. No. They are forcing men to do jobs that women are more comfortable doing, and I don't mean that in a sexist way, but they're forcing them to carry in a way which is uncomfortable. Moshe notices in their suffering. So often, what's required of people who are in a position of leadership is not just to see suffering, but to see inside the suffering, to notice the things that people are not noticing, to recognize pain where your average person doesn't. And what makes Moshe the greatest leader of all, ironically, is not that he is gifted. In fact, Moshe is the opposite of gifted. He is the most humble man, uniquely inappropriate for a leader, correct? He is someone who can't speak properly. How could he be the mouthpiece when he can't string a sentence together without stumbling over his words? Winston Churchill was famous for quoting Shakespeare in Twelfth Night. He used to say, some are born great, others achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. I probably got that wrong. I'm a Torah scholar, not a thespian. But the line itself to me was illuminating. In some ways, I think Churchill used to quote it because he was referring to himself. and the power of ascendancy that came to him because of the time that he was thrust into. But just apply that sentence to Moshe. Moshe is born great. He achieves greatness. But when the time comes for him to take that position, he doesn't want it. He doesn't want the fame. He's not trying to be a leader for the sake of being one. He has greatness thrust upon him. And he says no until God convinces him that he's the only one that can. And why is he appropriate? Because he feels the pain of the people around him. If you can feel the pain of the people around you, you're suited to lead with nothing else. With nothing else. Because you'll do something. You know, when we're afraid, when we see pain, pachad is the word for fear. And those same letters in Hebrew spell the word dochef, which means to push. When we see people in pain or afraid, that pushes us to do something. And you're witnessing today on the shores of Turkey, people, volunteers for Israel Aid, who are helping refugees off boats, hugging them. The most unlikely of compatriots, people who on another shore are at war with each other. But they're witnessing something on television and they say to themselves, I've got to do something about this. You're not a leader because you have a title in front of or after your name. You're a leader because you can sense and feel someone else's pain or issue and step up to the plate and make a difference in their life.